This will be a very confusing video to watch. A lot of it was written while I was severely sleep deprived, and the subject matter is extremely adult, so just take that into consideration before watching. Mouthwashing is the latest in a long line of indie horror games that have blown up in popularity. Five Nights at Freddy's, Benny and the Ink Machine, and many others. Mouthwashing tells the story of a doomed cargo supply ship and the minty surprises inside, featuring only 5 characters, not including the world's scariest horse. Jimmy, Anya, Curly, Swansea, and Daisuke are the crew of the Tulpar, a large freighter ship. The game was developed by Wrong Organ and published by Critical Reflex. The game delves into the broken psyche of the evil Jimmy. The game is a short one, only 2 hours, but will stay with me for years. See, unfortunately, I didn't know that, Steam recorded how long you played for, even if you paused it, and so I have 144 hours in the game. I spent most of my time with the game staring at the pause screen because of that goddamn horse. The gameplay is incredibly simplistic, a first-person almost walking simulator. There is limited interaction with the surroundings. Things that you can interact with are highlighted in a sort of box, which sometimes has more little boxes inside. The puzzles are few and far between, usually using the ever-helpful code scanner. There are quite a few bosses, including the Blind Beast. The Blind Beast can hear you and will sort of kill you in some way, making you restart from an invisible checkpoint. The save points are almost constant. Every time Jimmy or Curly flashes back, the game auto-saves. The weapons, when used, are just simple mouse clicks. The gameplay is incredibly simple, but that works in its favour, as I feel that the more complicated a horror game is, the less effective the scares are. This affects games like Resident Evil 4 or Dead Space. The horror is massively inflated by the game being in first person, because you're up close and personal with all of the horrors inside of the Tulpar. There is a sort of repeating segment where you have to feed Curly painkillers. The screen cuts to black and you can just hear Curly gagging and choking down his medication. In the later 20 minutes, I'll explain that there are some proper boss fights, one with an imaginary Swansea in a graveyard for Daisuke, and a sort of one with Anya's metaphorical horse baby. I'll explain it later, I promise. These bosses are simplistic, but effective in their narrative purpose and in their use of increasing the horror. The story is non-linear, an excellent framing device that allows for more turns quicker. It's mostly told from the perspective of Jimmy, the co-captain, and Curly, the captain. Both Jimmy and Curly hallucinate, however Jimmy has violent hallucinations, which is a sign of his guilty conscience. It's implied that he had a troubled life back on Earth, maybe even some jail time. I personally think that his mental health was abandoned years ago. Most of the characters cannot call themselves good. Curly, Jimmy, and Swansea are not good men, but they handle that in different ways that reflect their backstory. Curly wants to talk any issues away and maintain the high morale on the ship. Jimmy chooses to put the blame on everyone else but himself, and Swansea breaks his sobriety and kills Daisuke, letting Jimmy put Daisuke's death on his shoulders. The game opens with the captain setting the ship to crash into an asteroid and turning the autopilot off. He is then chased around the Tulpar by Polly, the mascot of Pony Express, until he is cornered. This is an example of Jimmy's hallucinations becoming more violent. He thinks that he's being chased around by what is essentially his moral compass or the angel on his shoulder. Horses in fiction usually represent power and control, but sometimes something more sexual in nature. The horse is the animal that Jimmy would say he is. He lusts for control and power, probably so he can officially blame others for his own actions. We see Curly after the crash, and he has become a crippled wreck of a man, covered from head to toe in bandages and moaning idly. He's missing his arms and most of his skin, including his lips, rendering him unable to speak. He needs to be fed painkillers by the onboard medical officer Anya. Anya didn't finish medical school and is belittled and demeaned by a power-hungry Jimmy. Anya is a victim of rape. She was assaulted by Jimmy and forced to carry his baby, much to his chagrin. After the crash, Anya sleeps next to the motion-activated Polly statue. That is all the protection she has from Jimmy. After she told Curly, he was shocked, but instead of taking action, he just wanted to talk it through. This obviously doesn't work, and it's up to interpretation if he even has a talk with Jimmy. Curly's inaction causes a rift between him and Anya. He encourages her to tell Jimmy that she is pregnant, and he doesn't take the news well, causing Anya to hide in the cockpit. She also hides the gun on board the ship for fear that Jimmy would use it on her. Curly is unbearably human in this situation, a symptom of his excellent writing. He doesn't want to think that his friend Jimmy is capable of something like that, and yet he is. Jimmy is undoubtedly evil and has no excuse for his actions. A main theme of the game is taking responsibility. Swansea is the senior mechanic on board the Tulpa. He is the mentor to young Daisuke. Swansea has a wife and kids back home and has worked for Pony Express for decades. An alcoholic in recovery, Swansea's story is perhaps more depressing as we watch him come to terms with his mortality by getting as drunk as possible. Daisuke is a young man. His mother got him the apprentice job on the Tulpa. He sees himself as lazy and worthless, and his death is in vain. Swansea becomes like a second father to Daisuke. Once Swansea starts drinking, so does he, although his alcohol tolerance isn't quite as high. Daisuke had a future which was thrown away in an act of selfish desperation from Jimmy. He's put out of his misery by Swansea. This is a parallel to what should have happened to Curly. Throughout the entire game, Curly is in some sort of immense pain, with one exception, which is his late-night conversation with Anya. Curly is cooked alive by his own friend, forced to endure the raw pain of having a leg cut off thanks to the sea of delusions from Jimmy, and then being force-fed that leg, vomiting who knows how many times. Curly got the punishment Jimmy deserved. Even at the end when Jimmy kills himself and freezes Curly, Jimmy deserved to feel the pain that Curly did. The second half of the game follows exclusively Jimmy, as his hallucinations get worse and more violent until he has a talk with Polly on a pile of mouthwash. He walks through the dark corridors of the Tulpa which shift and change, the floor becoming a distressed Curly's face and the walls becoming covered in eyes. He scans a womb and births a horse centipede thing that will kill him if he isn't quick enough. The stress he put on himself mixed with the guilt of his own actions tipped him over the edge. Even as he carries Curly to the cryopods he is hallucinating, an impossibly long corridor. Jimmy is by no means a sympathetic figure. He deserves the punishment that Curly receives, but he tried to redeem himself in the end. He truly wants Curly to live, and while freezing him, Jimmy kills himself off screen. This punishment is not enough for the actions that Jimmy took. The graphics are very retro, inspired by games on the PS1 or 2. That seems to be the developer's shtick, as their other game, How Fish is Made, looks very similar. The music is harsh and mechanical, an excellent tension builder, and the sounds, when you feed Curly his painkillers, are downright vomit-inducing. He gags, and at one point you can hear Jimmy physically assaulting him to get it down. Curly also laughs at one point, seeing the desperation in Jimmy's eyes. There is no dialogue in the game that is spoken, unless by Polly. I massively enjoyed myself while I played Mouthwashing. Its lack of jump scares and constant tension always left me wanting more. My friend can attest to my reaction to the ending, which was complete shock. It is a game that sticks with you for a long time. It makes you think, but at the same time you don't want to think about it. As is the norm with these kind of games, the fandoms are incredibly bright and happy places. It is not uncommon to see a survivor alternate universe, maybe one where Anya survives and finishes medical school. The amount of fan art is staggering and the cosplays are all incredible. My final rating is 7 out of 10, not enough water. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Give me a suggestion for my next review in the comments. Hopefully, this time, the actual fucking next one should be The Last of Us 2. It's just that script is very long, and I need to figure some stuff out. So, thank you very much.